Welcome to a Thursday edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside from CBS Sports.com. He's playing sick today, folks. Sam Quinn is here. This is your Jordan flu game.
Yeah, I was gonna say I must have had some bad pizza in a hotel in Utah, right? Like that's what happened, and nothing
That's
else. There's
exactly
no
right.
alternative explanation. That's what's going
Yeah,
on here.
you're fighting through it though, and we thank you for it. We love having you on Thursdays. Later in the show, we're going to do. I can't believe this, Sam. We're a quarter of the way through the season already, so we're going to do awards at the quarter mark, and we'll do team of the night. But first, we got to start with the Lakers. You and I and producer Aaron last night were texting each other throughout that game, and what a disaster the Lakers are right now. They lost by 41. Sam, they emptied their bench at the 8:44 mark. It's the sixth blowout of the season. They've been outscored by 70 in the last two games combined. That is the worst stretch in franchise history. Top level takeaways from this, because I looked at the offense. There's no movement. There was too many turnovers. They look completely lost. And then defensively, it is a disaster.
I think, and I was kind of on this train coming into the season that the roster was so flawed that like changing coaches didn't matter. And having LeBron and AD was no longer this like automatic ticket to the contender circle. The first 15 games or so, I think they started 10-4. They shot well and the
Yep.
schedule was easy and there was like this breath of new life with JJ as the coach because they really just didn't like Darvin Ham last year. You could made it very easy to overlook that the roster just isn't that good. And now the schedule's gotten harder and they've kind of settled into the season. It's kind of becoming clear here that, oh no, they're just not a very good team. I don't know what that means because like even LeBron in the state that he's in now and AD hurt, that's still enough top end talent that like, oh, they could go 500, they could get the 10 seed, something like that. But like any notion that this team could contend is like gone, right? Like they have no perimeter defense. They can't, they're turnstiles out there. The offense has taken a big step back. I don't know how many guys on this team I actually trust. Like I think LeBron, AD, and Austin Reeves are probably the only above average players on the roster. Like I don't know what there is really to be excited about here anymore.
Well, there were some things earlier in the season to be excited about. Dalton Connect was one of them. He got put back into the starting lineup, but I have a whole bunch of things that I want to work through here with the team. One of them is Dalton Connect, who took 4 shots last night. So he's a starter on a team that is offensively challenged, and they're not getting him any looks. He's not getting any
Also,
looks. I don't understand what's happening.
he's like one of the worst defensive players in the NBA. And like, by the way, they expected that. That's part of why
Yeah.
he fell in the draft along with his age is that like he's not a very good defensive player. That's okay. You can still provide a lot of value being a knockdown shooter who can put the ball on the deck, like kill closeouts, get a lot of cut baskets. That's fine. They didn't need him to be a great defender. But if you're going to play him as much as they need to, given the talent deficiency here, you have to actually use him on offense, right? Like that's the only
Yes.
reason he's on the court.
Well, I mean, for him to take 4 shots and only 2 of them be threes, it's just like really perplexing what they're doing. And then, as you mentioned, at the defensive end, it's like Keystone Cops out there. I mean, they really don't know what they're doing. I thought there was a really amusing moment to me, probably almost certainly not to JJ Redick in the first half, where D'Angelo Russell was in the paint and just like kind of forgot what he was doing and got called for an illegal defense. And no, they didn't end up hitting the free throw as a result. They didn't need it. The Heat didn't need it, but it was just like one of those moments where JJ earlier in the season, this was kind of the reason why he put D'Lo on the bench for not paying attention to detail. And the guy just like completely spaced out on it. And that was just one of several moments for that game last night where you went, what are they doing?
Some of the clips that floated around Twitter were like, these are worst of the season damning clips for a defense. There was a play, I think it was at the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second, where Jimmy passed to Kevin Love for a wide open three and he missed. But the
Yeah.
rebound on like multiple bounces went right back to Jimmy, who didn't take a step, passed it to Kevin Love, who also didn't take a step, and made the exact same three again. Like there were
Yeah.
some of the worst clips you're going to see all year from the defense. It was really like just a total debacle. And after the game, JJ, LeBron, the message was the same. This isn't a scheme thing. Guys just weren't playing hard. I don't know how you fix that because this is not a one game issue. They've lost 4 games in the last 12 days by at least 25 points.
Yeah, it's not great, but I am glad you asked how do you fix this, because you and I, mere mortals, what do we know? How could we possibly fix it? But afterwards, James Worthy, Big Game James, he was on the post-game show at Spectrum Sportsnet LA, and he had an idea that I think is quite novel and should definitely work. Here's what he had to say.
This trend is not cool, and it's just not cool. I mean, they need to get on the bus tonight and get some White Castle burgers and drive to Atlanta. And they need to think about who they are and what they need to do, because what they're doing right now ain't even close to Laker basketball. Not even close.
Just eating sliders, 1,000-yard stare out of a window for a 12-hour bus ride. I think James hit it. I could not stop laughing when I saw that last night. This is one of those situations where I don't know what they do, because it is a failure of roster construction, but I wanted to run past you too. LeBron had been in a pretty bad slump. He ended up hitting a 3-pointer last night, so the streak ended at 0 for 20, right? Last night, at least offensively, he was their best player, had 29 points on 12 of 18 shooting, but he hasn't been great over the last, couple of weeks here. He's definitely looked like he's slowed down a little. I like Point LeBron. I thought that facilitating, he's been good, but are they even worth making a move if you're not going to get a better version of LeBron? Or do you just throw your hands up and go, I don't know, maybe this thing is trickling towards the end here?
The one thing I would maybe condone on the trade front is give up a couple second-round picks for another center. Like, if you're trading Gabe Vincent and a couple second-rounders for Jonas Valanciunas, that's fine. That's not going to make you much better. What that does is it kind of protects Anthony Davis a little bit, because the reality here is whether he's going to be on your team for the next 5 years, or if the LeBron thing is coming to an end and you're eventually going to trade him, you kind of want to keep him healthy and lighten his workload. Like, we made the jokes over the years, like, oh, Anthony Davis doesn't want to play center. Well, if keeping him healthy, if playing him at power forward is what keeps him healthy, they're not going to win anything. So you might as well keep him healthy. That's the one thing I would condone. It would be really irresponsible, given where they are now, to trade a first round pick for Cam Johnson, or trade a first round pick for whatever 3-and-D wing you can find out there. They're not one player away. And I saw some people making the comparison on Twitter yesterday. Oh, could they be like Dallas was last year, where they trade a couple of picks for PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, and suddenly they're in the NBA Finals? No, they're not close at all. Luka last year compared to where LeBron is now, it's night and day. Anthony Davis was an MVP caliber player the first 2 weeks or so, or now more than that, the first month or so. The last couple of weeks, he's been playing with this plantar fasciitis, and he hasn't been the same. Anthony Davis yesterday on defense, he got picked on. Jimmy Butler was looking for him in switches. When does that ever happen, right? They're not even close right now.
Yeah, early in the season, and Bill was one to caution me against believing in the Lakers, but early in the season, my whole thing was, you have 2 all NBA players on this roster. Yes, I know that LeBron James is, rapidly hurtling towards 40 and will turn so this month, but I thought he looked really good during the Olympics. I thought he looked good to start the season. Anthony Davis looked amazing to start the season. And it really redounds to, if those 2 guys don't look like a better approximation of themselves moving forward, then this team is absolutely cooked. I still believe in LeBron. I was talking to you two that somehow, you and producer Aaron, that somehow, including Bill, I have been put in the position to defend the greatest basketball player of all time, but it kind of does deserve defending, right? I mean, he's not been the LeBron that we've become accustomed to, at least not shooting the ball. I still think he's been a pretty good facilitator.
Well, that Olympic example was pretty instructive. He was great on a team where everybody else was great, but he's going to be 40 in a few weeks. Asking him to carry this sort of load on a flawed roster night after night after night is just not feasible, right? He has nights where he looks great. He was the one Laker, I mean, maybe not on defense, but he was the one Laker last night that looked pretty good on offense.
Yeah.
He has nights where you'd think he was 31, and then he has nights where obviously he's not close to his old self. The 3-point shooting thing is whatever. I don't give that much thought, because LeBron has always been a streaky shooter, right? His mechanics at earlier points in his career would kind of get out of whack for a couple weeks, and he'd fix it, and then it would be okay. The thing that really gets me is that if you look at his shooting percentages at the rim, on drives, on 2-pointers, the stuff that like in transition, the stuff that made LeBron at his absolute best, they're all trending down pretty meaningfully, right? Like that doesn't mean they're terrible, but the Lakers can't have a LeBron that's good for 40. They need to have a LeBron who's just LeBron, right? Like that's sort
Yeah.
of where I'm at. And I go back to a few years ago where Lakers have Russell Westbrook on an expiring contract for the entire year. They have that Buddy Hield Miles Turner trade just sitting there waiting for them for months. They don't take it. They don't take it. They don't take it. It felt like throughout that whole season, Rob Pelinka was looking at LeBron and AD and being like, hey guys, prove to me that you deserve a trade. And as the season went on, it became pretty clear that LeBron and AD were still good enough to like maybe not win the title, but meaningfully compete. On deadline day, they decide, you know what, let's go for it. They make the trade for D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt. They make the Western Conference Finals. I just don't see how that scenario is repeating itself this year.
Yeah, and the thing that was striking to me, despite the fact that I still believe in LeBron, and kind of funny that I have to say that, but yes, I still do believe in LeBron. But you guys last night pointing out his on-off numbers haven't been good, have actually been pretty bad. So, I for them to do anything this season, he needs to be out there and playing well. But the big thing too is Anthony Davis. Like, it's tough right now when he's clearly not right. And at that point, if you're not getting a real Anthony Davis, then what are we even doing here?
I don't have a good answer for you. And like we're seeing a comment here, Abby Jackson, AD and LeBron haven't shown anything, in my opinion, for the front office to take them seriously. Like that's right. It's not even an argument at this point. Like honestly, where I'm at here, they're not going to do it from a practical perspective. It's just not practical. Like I don't quite know what they're gaining out of having LeBron and AD on this team. Like maybe you play out the season, they don't have their first round pick, fine. What I'd kind of be thinking right now is like we need to rebuild. Can we work with LeBron and AD to find them new homes?
We're going to go with big game James first, though. We're going to try the White Castle slider 12-hour bus ride to
John,
how long is it from Miami
ride.
to how long
I
is
have
it
taken
from
that
Miami?
bus ride from Miami to Atlanta. My junior class trip in high school when I was in Miami was to Atlanta. We took the bus. I promise you that's not the solution. My back has not been the same. It's been 15 years. I'm not the same. Don't do it.
How long was that ride?
It had to have been at least 10 hours. It felt like 100.
Well, that'll fix them right up. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And then on the other side, as I mentioned, we're a quarter of the way through the season. So we're going to hand out quarter season awards. We'll do that next. This is Beyond the Arc. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. John Gonzalez and Sam Quinn. Just a reminder, you can get us wherever you find your favorite podcast. Please download, subscribe, leave a review. And then on Spotify, if you look below the play button on the Spotify app in full screen mode, you can tell us what you think. Leave us a comment or a question on the show. All right, quarter season awards, Sam. We are a fourth of the way through the season. So we're going to hand out some way too early awards. I suspect there's going to be consensus on a number of these. We'll start with one of those. MVP, we're both going Joker, yeah?
Yeah, it's Nikola Jokic, and it's not close. I did 1 month awards, I don't know, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago. At that point, Nikola Jokic led the NBA in assists, rebounds, and three-point percentage. Like, what do you do with that? We can go through it if you want. I have the case in front of me. He's averaging 30, 13, and 10, career highs in steals and deflection. So, like, the defense, I think, has been better than it's ever been. Like, I don't – he's perfect. He's everything you want in a player. Like, he's – at this point, I don't think that there really even is a true MVP race. We can get into some of the lower ballot candidates if you want. I think the reality is if Jokic keeps playing like this, he's going to win MVP. If somebody else wins MVP, it's because he didn't play 65 games or because he started playing worse.
Yeah, and I mentioned this too. I think you were actually on the show. The only other guy who's ever done 4 out of 5 is LeBron, and Joker's plus minus during this run is considerably better. Yeah, I think it's Joker and then it's everybody else. I did want to talk about everybody else though, because I think after Joker, the top 5, there's a pretty clear top 4. It's Joker, SGA, Giannis, and Tatum. Then you got to get to 5. And that's where I'm like, who are we putting fifth in this year's race?
I don't really have. I mean, like, I kind of look and I say, like, Luka is gonna end up occupying that slot.
Probably, yeah.
Like, that's how it's gonna. And he's already started. Like, we see this every year, right? Where he starts out slow for the first month, and then he
Yep.
misses a few games, and then he comes back, and like, you look at the points, rebounds, assists, and it's like, oh, 61, 64, 60, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. Like, he's kind of started on that front. Like, you could maybe make Anthony Davis the legacy number 5 right now because he was so good that first month or so of the season. But you're right, it is a pretty clear top 4. Who do you have at number 2?
Okay, I have SGA, although it's a real toss-up because Tatum's been so good and Giannis is really coming on right now. But I have SGA just because he's the best player on the best team in the Western Conference and maybe the best team in the NBA potentially. But yeah, it's a toss-up between those three. Who do you have?
I have Giannis, so it's not even so much an issue with SGA. His 3-point shooting is down, not in a way that's really concerning. It started to bounce back. And a lot of the role players their 3-point shooting is down. Like Alex Caruso has not been able to hit anything this year.
No.
Kason Wallace has missed a lot of very makeable shots. They were first in 3-point percentage last year, and they're 21st so far this year. I think that's going to normalize. I don't know if they're going to be first, but like their offense is so dependent on SGA drives to his spot. He passes.
Yeah.
They get like this wide open batting practice 3. That hasn't quite been as clear this year. I think once that does, there's a very good chance he settles at number 2. I am leaning Giannis at number 2 right now. I have some concerns, and there's a real reason that he's not up there with Jokic, and that I know Bucks fans don't want to hear this. He is not the same guy defensively that he was when he was winning MVPs. Like, if you look at basically every number, the defensive field goal percentage allowed is like good, not great. You know, like he's contesting fewer shots than he was at his peak. The defense as a whole has obviously been a mess. Offensively, he's been spectacular. And the real thing you want to point out here is he is killing it in mid-range in a way that, like, I never would have thought possible. Like, remember when James Harden was just calling him, like, the run and dunk man? Like, he still kind of is doing that, but he's also shooting 47.5% on mid-range shots, which is
he's been
like
spectacular.
Borderline elite. Like, he has been so good on offense. I think a lot of their, like, bounce back over the last couple weeks has just been they're in the East and they're playing a weak schedule. So I don't know that, like, I think in the end they're going to win, like, 45 games in a bad conference. And, like, I don't know, I'm not super excited about that. But he was my number 2 for now. The offense has just been so overwhelming.
Yeah, they're really taking advantage of a portion of the schedule where they should take advantage of it, right? I mean, they should be winning these games pretty comfortably. They have been, and he's been padding the stats. So yeah, I have no problem with Giannis. I want to go back to 5 because again, I think the top 4 are pretty clear right now, and I'm in agreement with you that eventually Luka will be the 5th guy. But I just wanted to throw a name at you, see what you think of this. Karl Anthony Towns. What do we think of? Because the Knicks offense is outrageous right now. And he has been, look, defensively, we all know that he has some issues and that team has some issues, but they're moving up the West or the Eastern Conference rankings. The offense is humming, and he has been every bit as good as advertised at that end of the floor.
I don't think it's crazy. I wouldn't do it. Like, if we're picking a guy based on one end of the floor, Victor Wembanyama is a lot better on defense. Like, he's the best defender in the world. And he's good on offense, whereas Towns is incredible on offense, like maybe MVP caliber, but the defense has been such a problem for him. You can get me on all NBA for Towns, and I think he's an all-star lock, at least at this point in the season. I'm not quite ready to go there. Maybe if the Knicks were like 3 or 4 games better and like really maybe competing with Cleveland and Boston, I could get behind that. As I say this, I'm almost talking myself into Wemby as the clear defensive player of the year, spoiler alert, who is also like really good on offense too. But I do think there is a big drop off, and I am keeping that seat warm for Luka.
Yeah, me too. I think it's going to be Luka. And then let's do defensive player of the year because you mentioned it. It's pretty clearly Wemby. No, I mean, like, I was sitting here going, who's even second now?
He is the leader in blocks. He is second among centers in deflections. Opponents are shooting 47.4% within 6 feet of the rim against him. Like, what do you do with that? Like, he strikes more fear into the heart of drivers than any big man in the NBA. I do want to point out, by like almost every metric, Chet Holmgren was slightly better before he got hurt. Now, that
Yeah.
being said, Chet Holmgren also has the best group of perimeter defenders in the NBA. So, like,
Yes, he
it's
does.
irrelevant. He's not going to play 65 games. But, like, this would have been a real close race between Chet and Wemby if Chet hadn't got hurt. But Chet did get hurt. So, congratulations on your trophy, Victor.
I think that's interesting because coming into the season, especially after last year where, people were hemming and hawing about Rudy getting another one and Wemby saying, let him have it this year. I'll get next year. And, Bill and I were talking, he could be the defensive player of the year the next 5 years. But you bring up a really good point about Chet, when healthy, potentially challenging him for that mantle, being the best defensive player on maybe the best defense in the NBA is a significant thing here. So we're in agreement that it's Wemby. Who do you have two at this point?
I'm at Dyson Daniels. The steals numbers and the deflection numbers, they're really impressive. They're not as historic as they were maybe a couple weeks ago, where like he's leading the NBA in steals, but Alex Caruso and Tari Eason are getting more steals per minute. So it's not like he's at this point where he's stealing 4 or 5 times per game. He has 54 more deflections than anyone else in the NBA. Like, I think you can poke some holes. Like, the Hawks defense is not good no matter who you put on the floor. And like,
Sure.
Weirdly, when Dyson plays without Trae Young, the Hawks defense is bad. I don't know what's going on there, but I think he is like, I think steals, deflections, blocks, like the big possession swinging plays tend to get a little underrated because they were overrated for so long, that I think now we look so much more at like, has to be a rim protector, which I mostly agree with. Oh, how good is he in man? How good is he in help? Like, there really is something to be said for a guy who changes, like steals a bunch of possessions for you, and he's doing that way better than anybody else in the NBA.
Yeah, he's been great, and I definitely have him first team all defense. I'm kind of the default to it has to be a rim protector to be defensive player of the year, but we've got Wemby, so this is really all just academic anyway. Like, it's not like we're taking Wemby out and going, we have to find a new defensive player of the year. It's going to be him. Let's do one more and then we'll take a break. Let's go to rookie of the year. This one also feels right now like a little bit of a runaway, especially because, as we mentioned, Dalton Connect, he had like that flash where you're like, oh, maybe, as he's in the starting lineup, and if he's stacking up a bunch of, you can put him aside for a second. I think it's pretty clearly Jared McCain. And then after that, like, we could have a discussion about too. I know you and I are both pretty high on Stephon Castle.
Yeah, like in a normal year, if this season had played out the way I think we expected it to, Stephon Castle like would have been a solid rookie of the year. Like, flawed, but a lot of promise. Somebody that I think we look at and say, if the shot comes along, he's a future all-star. If the shot doesn't come along, he's still a pretty good player. I don't think people really appreciate what's happening here with Jared McCain. Like, this is not just somebody who is like, oh, having a hot shooting start for a bad team. Like, he's scoring more points per 100 possessions as a rookie than Luka, Shaq, Kevin Durant. Like, this isn't just 3-point shooting either. It's happening everywhere. If you look up like where he is among rookies in like every area of the shot, it's like 5th in restricted area field goals, like 1st in non-restricted paint, 5th in mid-range, 2nd in threes. Like, this is a true 3-level scorer who's killing it from basically everywhere. The numbers are just absolutely bonkers here. Like, he's 8th in effective field goal percentage all time among rookies at his scoring volume. Everyone above him is a center. Like, this is not just a hot shooting start. This is the future, like 25 points per game scorer. This is the future all-star.
Yeah. So I wanted to add, you said, people don't maybe fully appreciate what's happening here. I wonder if maybe Nick Nurse is one of those people. Now, last night he played 38 minutes, but the game before that, he was coming off the bench, and I was like, okay, I understand why you're doing it, because you're thin on guards and maybe it's easier to stagger him and Maxey, and you have McCain running that second unit. But I think his handling of this kid has been curious. It took him a while to identify him in the first place. Then it took him a while to get him some minutes. Then it took him a while to realize he was a solid rotation player. Then it took him a while to make him a starter. And then, like there has been this like slight regression while both PG and Embiid was out in terms of his minutes. Like, again, last night, full marks. They end up, doing Sixers things. But I wonder what's going on with Nick Nurse.
it feels a little old school coachy where like number one, oh, don't trust the rookie. Like number two, oh, I need to have my defensive players on the floor so I know what to expect. It was strange to me, but like the weird thing about this too is like his offense is not going to be tamped down by having the stars back on the floor. He's going to like actively amplify those guys because he's such a good movement shooter. Like he's not accumulating these points strictly by like running pick and roll and running isolation. This stuff is happening fully within the flow of the offense. And like he's clearly very good at maximizing when a defense is keyed in on somebody else. Case in point, last night, like Jalen Suggs was giving Tyrese Maxey all of these problems. He torched the Magic. He was like, oh, okay, you're going to guard Tyrese that way? Like, cool. I'm going to get all these cuts to the basket. I'm going to cut into open space and get open jumpers. Like, that's not the sort of thing you expect out of a rookie. How complete his scoring game is right now for his age is like, you see one of these guys every like 5, 6, 7 years.
Well, I appreciate you saying that he's getting all of this in the flow of the Sixers offense, as though the Sixers have any flow to their offense. So that was nice of you. But what I was saying, I was just looking up the numbers while you were talking. So the other night against the Hornets, they get a win, but that was a game where they were like desperate for offense. And what happened here? McCain played 22 minutes in that game. Like, explain that to me. I don't get it. And last night
he was positive plus minus in that game too, wasn't he? It was really strange.
Yes, it was extremely strange. And then last night he plays 38 minutes, 39 minutes. So, I don't get it personally. I think it's just like maybe Nick Nurse is a very smart coach, but sometimes I think he can be a little too clever by half. Like, this isn't hard. You've got two guys who are injured and who are all-stars and who you desperately need to play, but are not playing right now. So just run the kid out there. Run him out there with Maxey and like see what happens, and don't overthink this thing because you're a bad team and you're 5-15, and this shouldn't be that hard. We're going to take a quick break, and then on the other side, we're going to continue our quarter season awards. You're watching Beyond the Arc.
Welcome to JJ's.
I'll have wait, there's no way I can get a burger?
No chance. But you can have the NFL on CBS streams live on Paramount Plus. Oh, hang on. There's a toy.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. Just a reminder, you can find us on YouTube at Beyond the Arc CBS. Please hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe. There's a little bell symbol there. If you click on that, you'll get notified when we go live. We're live Monday through Friday at noon Eastern. All right, we got 3 awards down, Sam. This is where it starts to get a little more fun. Coach of the Year was a runaway to start with Kenny Atkinson, and now I'm not so sure it is.
I'm not picking him. I'm picking Ime Udoka. If you look at what the formula tends to be for this award, number one, the higher seed you are, the better, obviously. But like number 1 and number 2 seeds win almost every year. And when they don't, you don't really go past like number 4. And then among those top seeds, it's always who exceeded their win projection by the most. And like, that's pretty clearly Houston. I can't remember what the exact win total was, but it was like around 500. And they're tracking now to win in the 50s. Like, this defense that they've constructed, it's not like you didn't look at that roster he inherited 18 months ago and said like, wow, there's so much defensive potential. He has built a culture there, and it's seeped down to like almost everybody. Obviously, Amen Thompson and Tari Eason are great defenders. You know who shouldn't be a great defender? Alperen Şengün. He's not great, but he's getting pretty good. He's better than he would be under any other coach, that's for sure. Like, this is really a clear case of a coach coming in and building a culture, just like he did in Boston, where for the first, 3-4 months of that season, they were 500, and then boom, they're unstoppable the rest of the way. This is a younger roster. It's a less talented roster. It kind of feels like something similar is playing out there.
I love that you're saying this because normally I'm the one on this show saying it, and I'm trying to convince Bill that what we're seeing, like our believe your lying eyes when it comes to the Rockets. Yes, their offense can be a little muddled sometimes, and it can be a little bit of on any given night, like it's going to be somebody different. It's going to be Fred VanVleet tonight, or it's going to be Jalen Green tonight, or it's going to be Alperen Şengün tonight. But defensively, that group works, and it has everything to do with Ime Udoka. And I think I'm still Kenny, but it's real close. It went from I just give it to him right now to, ooh, yeah, this is going to be a race between these two guys. How much of a believer are you? Because quite clearly you're a believer in the Rockets defense. I am too. How much of a believer are you in the Rockets? Like, hey, top 3-4 team in the Western Conference at the end of the year, and like actually maybe being a hard out or doing something significant in the postseason.
They remind me of the Grizzlies the year that the Warriors won the championship, where they were a very high seed. I think they were the second seed. And we didn't go into the playoffs thinking, oh, they're going to compete for the championship. But they won a round. And then in the next round, like before John Morant got hurt, they were right there with the Warriors, ended up winning it all. I kind of think that's the way this is going to go, where they'll be like the third seed and maybe they'll win a round. And then they'll get into a series with the Thunder or the Nuggets or whoever. And it'll be close. It'll be like 5 hard-fought games or six games, like something that you can really build off. I just don't think you can meaningfully contend for a title with an offense where theirs is. I think they're eventually going to have to make their star trade, or something internally is going to have to change. Şengün, for all the praise I've heaped on him defensively, has been worse offensively this year. They're barely playing Reed Shepherd. Jalen Green is stagnated. They have to make a trade or get some sort of internal development offensively to get that end of the floor going. And the other part of this is so much of what makes their defense good is the bench. It's Tari Eason and Ahmad Thompson, the Terror Twins. You don't play your bench as many minutes in the playoffs. Now, he has frequently closed games with Thompson, and like you look at the minutes totals, and he's played more than Jalen Green on several occasions. Yes. I think there's a chance eventually that Tari Eason replaces Jabari Smith in the starting lineup. Like, they could just make that switch. But so much of this is the energy of what happens when you put those guys in the game. I don't know that that is going to be as impactful in the playoffs.
They have done a lot of that. Like Ime likes to sort of mix and match. Yes, his starters are his starters and have been, but those two guys that you mentioned off the bench, frequently he's closing with them. And it's not always the same formula, right? It's not like it's Jabari Smith Jr. comes out and, you're running Ahmad Thompson in there late. Like sometimes Jabari's out there with Ahmad and, you're unplugging Jalen Green, or if you need offense, Jalen Green's still out there. If Dylan Brooks, like he's got these pieces that can mix and match. And it's almost kind of like having like 6.5, 7 starters where you're just kind of like rotating them through. I like your comp on the Grizzlies. I think that the comp for me has been last year's Wolves. I mean, both offensively and defensively, their ratings are about the same as the Wolves were last year. They're one of the best defensive teams in the league, and then they're a middle of the pack offensive team. I think the Wolves are probably slightly better offensively just from the eye test if I had to pick, but win around, be kind of plucky, give somebody some problems. I could see that this year.
Yeah, the difference between them and the Wolves is that the Wolves had 2 offensive players who are way better than anybody offensively that the Rockets have.
Yeah.
But, like, if you told me in 18 months, I don't know, Devin Booker is their Anthony Edwards, but they still have the same defensive infrastructure, great. I'm on board. Championship contender. Awesome. Something I was thinking about with Defensive Player of the Year, by the way, was as I was thinking about my number 3, which I landed on OG Anunoby, but there were so many bench guys that I gave real consideration to, both of the Houston guys, Jonathan Isaac, Alex Caruso. It is kind of funny. I don't know how we got here. I feel like so many of the best defensive players in the NBA right now are bench guys.
Yeah, and what you just mentioned too is a lot of wings, right? I mean, it's a lot of guys we're not talking about rim protectors. We're talking about guys who are just coming in and terrorizing defenses or offenses off the bench. Yeah, it's a weird situation. Speaking of bench, this is another one that I think is fun. 6th man of the year. I have a leading candidate, but I have 2 other guys that I think are right there. Who do you got?
I think it's a pretty clear winner. Like, Peyton Pritchard is having a Stephen Curry shooting year. And that's not me exaggerating. I have the numbers here right in front of you. Per 36, Stephen Curry making 5 threes. Per 36, Peyton Pritchard making 4.8 threes. Peyton Pritchard shooting 43.1% on threes. Steph shooting 41.9. Like, he is really shooting at an almost Stephen Curry level. He's not creating quite as many of them as Steph does, but he's if you look at the unassisted versus assisted field goal numbers, he's creating more than some very, very good scores. This is not just a pure shooter. This is an overall really good bench offensive player who holds his own defensively in most matchups. Underrated playmaker, and by the way, making a cool $7 million this year, and for the next several after that.
I was
Man,
going to
Brad
mention
Stevens is good at this.
he's been efficient, right? He's hitting almost 49% from the floor, which kind of surprising given the volume of threes that he's knocking down.
He could
He
be
has
the
been a good,
first 50, 40, 90 bench guy.
yeah. I mean, and they're to be such a solid piece of that rotation, like coming in, being an instant offense, high energy guy. You mentioned his contract. They paid Sam Hauser to do this,
Yeah.
and now Sam Hauser is like, oh no, it's going to be Peyton Pritchard instead. I mean, good for Peyton
The
Pritchard.
funny thing about this too, Sam Hauser, not a great shooter this year. I think he's going to correct that. Super underrated defender. I feel like every time I watch the Celtics, Sam Hauser checks into the game and somebody looks at him and goes, "Oh, I'm going to kill him off the dribble," and then it doesn't happen.
Yeah, they're so deep. They're so good. I think it's Peyton Pritchard too. We mentioned the two Terror twins in Houston. Do you have that? Like, how far away do you have, say, Amon Thompson from Pritchard or Tari Eason from Pritchard?
Could I pick them together? Like, can we do like a full
I know
ticket?
that's what I wanted to combine them
wanted to
into
do that
one
for
guy.
Defensive Player of the Year too.
If
But
you could
sadly, we
combine
can't.
them, I would take them as 6 men of the year. If we could go from 6 man to 6 men, then they win.
I think I would probably lean Thompson over Eason pretty slightly, just
Me too.
considering how many
Side
games
mix.
that he's closing and how much trust Udoka has in him. He would have a shot at the ballot. Buddy Hield is another guy who would have a shot on my ballot. Like, it's a pretty good overall bench here. I think my ballot right now would be Pritchard, Hield, Thompson.
So Buddy had a hot start, but then, minutes wise, Steve is still doing his Steve Kerr, everybody's going to play thing. And like, even in nights, like tonight, Steph Curry is going to be out again tonight. I'm really interested to see if Steve stops overthinking this and decides, okay, we're going to need some offense tonight. And also no Draymond. He's got a calf issue. Like, why not just let Buddy Hield go crazy tonight?
No, I mean, I think it's reasonable, and I think Steph made a good point after, like, it was a few games ago. I think it was over the weekend, where he basically said, like, it's hard for guys to get in a rhythm when they're playing like this. Part of what made Buddy so successful early in the year was that the minutes were pretty consistent. Now, the reason the minutes were so consistent was that he was shooting like 80% on threes or whatever nonsense it was. I do think Steve Kerr could make his life a little bit easier, but this also tends to be the Buddy Hield cycle, where he goes to a new team and he is the best shooter in the NBA for a month, and then he cools off and the defense starts to, be a little bit glaring. But ultimately, I just think he was so good early in the season that even if you do get a little bit of a knockoff now, ultimately, like, the sample isn't big enough for me to dissuade what he already done.
Yeah, I mean, 21 minutes in the last game, 16 before that. The last time that Steph was out, he only played 17. Like, what are we doing here? Tonight, more minutes for Buddy Hield. All right, last one for you on the quarter season awards. Most improved player. I got 2 candidates, and they both play for the same team.
Oh, interesting. I have 3, and none of them play for the same team. So
All right,
this is an award I'm very passionate about because I
Okay.
think they get it wrong every year. So usually this has become the first-time All-Star award. Everybody who's won this award since CJ McCollum has been a first-time All-Star. And if CJ McCollum was in the East, we'd be on like a 15-year streak of this. Personally, I tend to favor one of 2 other types of candidates. There is the like good starter or good bench guy who levels up into like a pseudo star or somebody like much better. Like that, think Julius Randle, who I guess did win and was a first-time All-Star. And then there's the totally out of nowhere guy who like was not playing minutes the year before and is suddenly very good. I'm making an exception this year where the guy I'm going to pick is going to be a first-time All-Star, I think, and I think is kind of running away with the award, and that is Franz Wagner. I don't think
That's a great
people
one.
appreciate, like, he's scoring more this year than Paolo Banchero did last year when Paolo was an All-Star. And that's not three-point shooting. He's shooting like 33.3% on threes. He's doing all of this like inside of the arc. He has become so advanced as a driver and playmaker. Like James Harden for years was the NBA's deceleration king. I think Franz Wagner might be like the heir to that, where he's so good at stopping and starting on a dime. It gets him so many extra free throws. It gets him so many clean looks at the basket. If you look at his head when he drives, I don't know that there are that many better drivers in the NBA at freezing defenders with their eyes. Like, his head is on a swivel when he's driving. It's incredible. Like, he is changing Orlando's entire trajectory as a franchise with how he's playing right now, because we were so determined coming into the year, oh, they have to trade for another shot creator. They have to trade for, my guy has been Anthony Simons the whole time.
Okay.
If Franz is like this, maybe you don't, and you can just be the awesome defensive team.
Yeah, and he's been much better defensively than I had previously given him credit for. I was down on him last year. I thought I wanted more from him, and I thought he wasn't efficient enough, especially from deep. And this season with Paolo checking out, him stepping forward, look, they're still a really offensively challenged team. This is a great pick by you, by the way. I kind of had overlooked him because he's been so good. It was almost like he's exceeded whatever this award is, that he's better than this award. But yeah, he probably does need to win it just on the merits of what he's done this season. I wanted to run, I had guys, because when I think about this award, I think of Franz has been so good. I think he's a lock as an all-star. We're almost even talking about all NBA consideration. That's how good he's been. For me, most improved is like a level down a little bit, but that's why I had Jalen Johnson at the top of my list. He's been so good for that team. He's the best player on that team.
I think that's reasonable. The only issue I have, and we go through this a lot, like Tyrese Maxey won last year. The big jump for Tyrese Maxey was 2 years ago. What really happened last year was Tyrese Maxey got the ball a lot more.
Yeah.
Jalen Johnson did most of his improving last year, I think, and nobody really noticed. He's certainly gotten better this year. It's just that, I think the bulk of the improvement came the year before. If you were to say, from the last 2 years, yeah, nobody's improved more than Jalen Johnson. He was not an NBA caliber player 2 years ago, and now he is not an all-star, but a very high-level starter.
I was saying this last year and was laughed at frequently on the show that he was the best player on that team. And
he would have won if he'd played 65 games.
Nobody was paying attention because the Hawks were bad last year, and there was all that drama between DeJounte and Trey and who should go and who should stay. We also mentioned Dyson Daniels earlier. Being in consideration for first team all defense, and you have him second on your DPOY, he should be at least in the conversation here. He's not going to win it, but I'm just saying, I have him on the list.
Yeah, I think the problem here is so much of the theory of Dyson Daniels is a long-term core guy is finding some real consistent function on offense. The three-pointers aren't really falling, and he's not some great driver. He's a good passer. I think there's a lot more to his game that can be unlocked there. He's good in transition. I just don't think he's good enough as a half-court offensive player to give him this award, but I do see what you're saying. I have two other guys I want to mention as well.
Yeah,
the
please
first
do.
is Norm Powell, who is scoring 10 more points per game this year than he was last year. Now, scoring has never been the issue for Norm Powell, but scaling up from good sixth man on a team with 4 Hall of Famers to second leading scorer. I don't know if Harden has passed him, but number 2 ball handler on a team that's totally bereft of offense and not seeing a major efficiency dip and really keeping that offense afloat for long stretches. That is really, really significant to me. So Norm Powell would probably be second for me. And then the other guy I want to shout out, I'm torn on the improvement part because he's been very good in the past, but nobody's really noticed. How do you feel about Ty Jerome in this race? Who was making half the threes, who was a very underrated defender, who was a core part of the 17, 18, and 3, whatever they are, Cleveland Cavaliers.
This is a deep cut. I love this for both of us because he's been on my radar for a while now. How do I feel about him? I love that we're bringing him up, and in another season, he'd probably finish, farther down the list. But yeah, he's been a really key contributor to that team and found money. He's been really good for the Cavs, and I think part of it is Kenny Atkinson figuring out what he had here. They had a need. He's been a great role player, bench player. But yeah, there's so many guys ahead of him. But yes, he should be in the conversation.
My big problem is that he was similar, not this good, but he was really solid as a bench guy for OKC when they were really bad, and then just kind of got discarded. And then he had a little bit of a stretch for the Warriors where he was a solid enough bench guy, and then again gets discarded, and then I think he gets hurt. He barely plays last year. I don't think he played at all last year. So, like, there's
He
been
didn't.
some glimmer of this. He hasn't put it together in quite the way that he has this year, but he's the guy that I look at where I'm like, he was not on my radar at all coming into the season, and now I wasn't going to pick him for Sixth Man of the Year, but I looked at him as I was considering the ballot.
Yeah, he deserves consideration. He's having a really fun season. All right, those are our quarter season awards. Let's do team of the night.
Give me the Hawks. John, are the Hawks good? I'm kind of starting to think the Hawks might be good.
We've been asking this question for a couple days now. Like, they're not, I mean, they're functional, which I guess when grading on an Atlanta Hawks curve, that makes them good.
I guess. I mean, like, they're 12-11. They just beat the Bucks, ended their streak last night.
Yep.
If they hadn't lost those 2 games to the Wizards, which, like, obviously those are major stains on their resume, I think they'd be the 4th seed in the East right now. Like, they're playing so well. Like, I think the combination of Trae Young and athleticism, we might have really underrated what that could be. There's still a real shooting deficiency there because Daniels and Johnson and Ricochet, there's a lot of overlap there where they're all kind of deficient as shooters, but they're all very high IQ and they're all good passers and they're super athletic and they're big wings. Like, getting all those guys together, it's been an interesting mix and they've been very hard to play. So I don't quite know if will it come down to earth when the shooting deficiencies really start to bear out? But for now, they're playing really well.
They are playing really well. You know who else is playing really well on that team? And like, have never been a believer in him, and I'm not sure that I am now, but I will say that he's playing. DeAndre Hunter is playing well.
Yeah.
Like,
he seemed like when he got that contract, I think it was like 5 years, $90 million. My thought was like, oh, this is the like everybody needs a wing contract where like
yeah,
he is wing size, therefore he gets paid. No, he's like actually living up to it and probably exceeding it this year. He's been really good.
I'd still like him to be a better defender because he's got the size.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, baby steps for DeAndre Hunter and the Atlanta Hawks. That's the 3rd time that they've been team of the night. They're tied for 1st place for reasons surpassing understanding. I'm torn on this one. The Heat put up 134 points last night. I think it was mostly just the Lakers being horrendous. So I'm going to go a different way. I'm going to go with the Wolves, who just feast on the LA teams. First, they beat up on, if the Wolves could only play the LA teams, they'd be fine. Because they beat up on the Lakers the other night, and then they beat up on the Clippers last night. They held the Clippers to just 80 points. Clippers looked horrendous. I am a believer in the Clippers. I think they've been pretty good this season. Certainly have exceeded expectations. They looked horrendous last night. I'm still really, really not sold on Julius Randle on that team. Like, the way that the ball stops when it goes in for him, Sam, like, everybody just stands around and watches him. I'm like, I hate this. Anyway, team of the night.
I'm so glad that you brought up those 2 teams because I'm working on this theory right now that the Lakers are the league-wide get-right team where the Timberwolves play the Lakers and destroy them, and then they come out and play the Clippers and destroy them too. Meanwhile, Miami has been listless all year.
Yeah.
And then they play the Lakers and they win by 40. I'm going to be watching them very closely these next few games. I do agree with you on the Julius Randle front. We did Western Conference grades for today on CBSSports.com, and I wrote about the Timberwolves. The real problem for me is that none of the perimeter guys can make a shot outside of Edwards. Like Dante DiVincenzo shooting terribly, Mike Conley shooting terribly, Jay McDaniels shooting terribly. I do wonder if the ball stopping for Randall has been a part of that. Maybe the ball is not really like flying around, and Anthony Edwards is not like, he can do the basic high level scorer passing stuff. Like, he can make easy reads and get assists. He is not somebody who is like actively enhancing teammates with his passing. So yeah, I think it's something to watch. It's been a pretty questionable fit. And now that Randall's jumpers aren't going in like they were early in the season, it's starting to look pretty iffy.
You and I just spent the last 3-4 minutes crushing the Wolves, and yet team of the night. I hate the way that offense looks. It's just most of the time, especially when Julius is involved, everybody's standing around watching him. And then the shooting thing that you mentioned is a significant problem. I mean, if Dante DiVincenzo is not hitting shots and Mike Conley is not hitting shots, and you mentioned Jaden McDaniels, the next time that guy gets going offensively will be the first time. They've been waiting ever since they gave him that contract. They've been waiting for him to take the leap and become, be in the conversation for most improved player and like look like an offensive component. He hasn't been, and like, I don't believe that he will be. So yeah, I got serious problems and concerns with that offense. But hey, the Wolves, congratulations. You're our new team of the night leaders. It's the 4th time that you've made team of the night. So most of those, though, I think were tongue in cheek, but we'll say. You mentioned you gave out grades on CBSSports.com. What else you got going on?
I've written about LeBron several times this week because that's kind of been
Sure.
starting with that Minnesota game. The LeBron and the Lakers have been kind of the story. So I think on Monday or Tuesday, I wrote about how he's like just dove into some of the numbers on like where is the decline coming, like where is he? And then I think a day later, I wrote like, what does this mean for the Lakers? Which was basically like, please, for the love of God, do not trade a first round pick. You absolutely shouldn't. He's not worth it at this point. So a lot of Lakers stuff this week. We did grades as well. And then, yeah, we got NBA Cup knockout stage coming. That'll be fun. I'm sure I'll do a lot of stuff with that. A lot of Cinderellas in the field this year. What is it?
Wow.
Atlanta, Orlando. It's going to be fun.
Yes, there's all kinds of stuff to check out on CBSSports.com. Go and read Sam and everybody else over there. And then tomorrow, Bill will be back with Brad Bodkin. Make sure to check those guys out. They'll be live on YouTube at noon Eastern. But for now, for my guy Sam Quinn from CBSSports.com, I'm John Gonzalez. We thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you later.